Welcome back to Love Relationships Real Talk. I'm Phoebe Smith. This is part 2 of our Fairy Tales versus Marriage episode, our season premiere. I said at the end of the last segment that we are going to continue this conversation around fairy tales and the marriage meme, or the idea of marriage, using the example of what we just saw on The Bachelorette with Rachel Lindsey. So I just finished watching that last week and my mind was on fire. It really hit close to home, actually, because the dilemma that Rachel was engaged in with her 2 final choices was exactly the dilemma that I was presented with in my own relationship. Except for I didn't have 2 guys. I only had 1, but it was the same situation, right? She actually had the 2 people representing the fairy tale and the marriage part, right? And so again, from the last episode, I mentioned that the fairy tale is what we want and the marriage is what we get. And hopefully what we get inside of the marriage is a lifelong partnership with someone who loves you for who you are to your core, and somebody who's going to help you grow and develop. And not only do that, but expect that you're going to experience changes as an individual and heal pains from the past, that they've been specifically brought into your life to help you heal, that they have that expectation and they know that that's what they're there for. And they stick with you through all of that. And so that's what we hope marriage would be. But there is this idea of a marriage meme. And so I'm just going to review that again for those of you who might not have seen part 1. But if you haven't seen part 1, check it out. The marriage meme is an idea, a societal expectation that we've been conditioned to think is supposed to happen inside of our relationship. And as I've said many times before, 9 out of 10 relationships aren't going to work. They're specifically there to help us learn more about who we are. And then we'll find that one person when we're ready that will help us take it to that next level in our growth and development. So this whole idea of marriage is a beautiful scenario, right? So even when we say that one word, marriage, as I talked about in the last segment, when we say that one word, it presents in our whole psyche this process that we're going to be experiencing and going through. But that might not be the case for everybody. So this was so perfectly depicted in this season of The Bachelorette with Rachel, because she did come down to being with the person that was going to give her what she went into this process wanting, which is a ring and a proposal and marriage. And then she had on the other side a person who, to me, looked like she found the one love out of that 9 out of 10 that you're supposed to be with, that you're supposed to take this journey with. Because they're going to be the ones who's going to challenge you, who aren't going to let you do your stuff, play out your shit inside of your relationship. That they're going to make you look at it and check it and deal with it. That person, to me, was Peter in this scenario. And she was very reluctant to moving forward with Peter for one reason. So all of this to me says that she was truly invested in Peter. If Peter had asked her to marry him in the end, she would have chosen Peter. Like, I'm 100% sure about that. 100% sure that she would have chosen Peter. They gave more time to Peter and the breakdown of that relationship than they did the winner, Brian. Brian, she had feelings of love for him. And you know, I would not even hesitate to think that she and Brian would not be able to have a perfectly lovely life together. That they will go off and have kids and build a beautiful life together. There's nothing that says that she and Brian cannot have just as an intense and meaningful relationship as she would have had with Peter. There's nothing that says that. The other thing that I always say that you'll be reminded of several times in this new season, and that I spoke of several times in the last season, is that there are never any wrong turns. There are only opportunities to learn and to grow. And so her picking Brian isn't like this big old devastation like Bachelor Nation is like, no, right? Why did you pick Peter? He was the one. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case at all. That she's going to be miserable, or that she and Brian's relationship isn't going to work out because she really should have picked Peter. You can have that dialogue, and that's what these parties are based on, right? When you have your bachelor party, they're based on like who's the one who's going to actually work out for her. It can work out with anyone you choose. It doesn't have to be a particular person, or it doesn't have to be the ethereal the one that's out there waiting for us with our name, tattooed across their forehead. It doesn't have to be that person. However, Rachel Lindsey was very lucky to have met that person with her name tattooed across his forehead in this edition of The Bachelorette. And his name was not Brian. His name was Peter. That was the man that was best for Rachel. And she knew it, and her family knew it. And now that Brian has watched the whole show to the end, he knows it too. Rachel has said many times that she felt like Peter didn't know what he wanted. But when in actuality, Peter did know what he wanted. He wanted her, and he wanted to take it slow. And he wanted to give it the time that it would need to take in order to be absolutely certain that she was the one he wanted to be with for the rest of his life. In any real life situation, and even for Rachel, in any real life situation, the shit ain't gonna happen in 9 weeks. It just not. And the only reason why she put that particular timeline on Peter and herself was because she wanted to be at the end of the show like every other woman does, being proposed to. Man on his knee with a fat diamond ring, which it was a fat diamond ring. She wanted to play out that image. And she did. That's what she got. But did she pick the fantasy? Or did she pick the commitment that marriage is supposed to bring to you? Like, really supposed to bring to you. Outside of this whole schema of what we're told marriage is supposed to be. Did she get it? I don't know. And like I said, she can make it whatever she wants to make it with Brian. And I'm sure it'll be fine no matter what. However, it helps us as the viewers to look at our own expectations around our relationships and the expectations and the decisions that we hold our partner or our love accountable to based on what we think we're supposed to be getting, what the meme tells us we're supposed to be doing and getting inside of our love relationships. So let's think outside of that box for a little bit. Let's look at what we could possibly have if we don't hold our partner accountable to these ideas that we've been conditioned to think is supposed to occur in our love relationships. So the first dilemma that we run up against, sort of like what Rachel did, is deciding whether or not we're going to cut this love loose because they're not falling in line with the context of the meme that we are conditioned to believe in and that we want to see play out in our lives. So what happens a lot of times is we get to this point in our relationship and we decide that it's time to shit or get off the pot, right? And so what happens? Somebody puts down an ultimatum. If you're not ready for this now, if you're not ready to do this thing called marriage now, then we need to go our separate ways. So I can go find somebody who does. there's nothing wrong with wanting to be married or wanting to start a family, because I even personally believe that if you're going to have a family, that the context of marriage is a healthy way to live that out. But if you are with someone that you can find nothing wrong with, that you enjoy your time with, that you are learning to more about who you are as a human being, that they bring that into the space that they share with you, there's no place for ultimatum. You just ride that out, honey. Just ride it out. Now, the ride can last a long time, like mine, 22 years. No marriage. But it's bringing me every single thing I need inside of what I would want from my love. And I grow and prosper from that in a multitude of ways. Now, this is the thing about ultimatums, which I discussed before. When you lay down an ultimatum, that's really sort of the end of it all, of the relationship for me. Because an ultimatum is only put in place when the person who you're in relationship with is not doing what you want them to do. And then you are basically telling them, you either do this or you lose me. And that's not, there's a no-win situation with either one of those alternatives. That's a no-win for anyone in that type of situation. Because now you have someone who you put in the position of not having made the biggest decision of their lives because they wanted to do it. Now you have someone who's making the biggest decision of their life because you told them you need to do this or you need to do that. Now, if they take the option of leaving, it's over. They leave. If they take the option of staying and marrying, now you'll never know if that's something that they actually really wanted to do for themselves. That's something that they, from their hearts, wanted to do. You'll never know. And you know what? In all honesty, I'm completely transparent here. That's why me and Mark aren't married today. Because on a couple of occasions where we were making that decision and he was going to make the decision not to lose me, that's the decision he was making. He was making the decision not to lose me. He wasn't making the decision to marry me because he wanted to. He was making the decision not to lose me. And I realized that. And for that reason, I said we shouldn't go ahead with it. So that's number one, what memes do to our relationship. They make you set ultimatums that interrupts what's going on in the relationship, the authenticity of what's going on in the relationship. So my second point that I want to make that memes do is they create this decision-making scenario that really is irrelevant. And it sends us down a road in our conversations with our love that have nothing to do with what the relationship is actually meant to be doing. That the conversation that we end up having with our love is based on the content and the context of what we've been conditioned to think our relationships are supposed to look like at a certain point. And so we start questioning whether or not our love really loves us, even though they've been there and been in relationship with us for as long as they've been there, and they've been good to us, and we are growing and learning and becoming better people as a result of being together. These things are happening, and yet we're taking us down this road of dismay where, because a certain thing is not happening, something that really doesn't have to happen. So we're having conversations about that instead of having conversations that are going to forward us and the relationship. And the third thing that memes do to our relationship is it makes ourselves or our love get the idea that we're not good enough. that we're not good enough to marry, that we're not good enough to commit to, that we're not good enough to say, I choose you, even though every day they're choosing you by being with you. But because they're not taking that step, it makes us feel like we're not good enough. And it makes our partner feel that what they're providing is not good enough. And so that might be a complete illusion to what's really going on in the relationship. That those factors don't even exist. But we make them huge, huge parts of our relationship because we're not getting this thing that we think we're supposed to be getting, that the relationship is not taking the course that we're taught that it's supposed to take. And we do that because when society conditions you to think that things are supposed to be a certain way, it's really hard to see beyond that. It's really hard to see another way because it's not acceptable by society. The other way is not acceptable. Even to this day, even though people have known me and Mark being together for years, even to this day that people still ask, why have you guys gotten married? Why do we need to get married? We're happy. Really? So this whole idea of marriage memes will continue to come up in future conversations because it shows up in so many different dilemmas and decisions that we come to inside of our relationships. And I'm getting all these questions and scenarios and situations posed to me, and a lot of them I can point to that marriage meme, that's the reason why you're having a problem, that you're focused on the meme and not what you actually have in reality. So we're going to continue this conversation. It's an interesting one, and it's one that you have to continue to participate in because you have to reprogram your thinking around what it is you've been conditioned to think. So stay tuned, stay plugged in, continue to like my videos, leave your comments, and please continue to write your emails, sharing your successes, your breakthroughs, your challenges in your love relationships. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.